You're listening to the Road to Wisdom podcast, weaving stories told by wonderful minds about all things motherhood, health, intimacy, politics, nature, and everything in between.
Join us on an adventure discovering unique experiences that we can learn from to enhance the ways in which we live.
We are your hosts, Chloe
and Kishia. Welcome everyone to the Road to Wisdom podcast. Today we have Sally Patti in the studio.
Hello.
We're really excited to have you here, Sally. We're going to go through Sally's birth experiences and her experience of loss. So just so everyone knows, there are themes of loss and grief. And so it's going to be a really fun chat today.
It's lighthearted.
Yeah, very, very light. If you're looking for a happy talk, no, we're going to get into the depths of some really important topics, and we are so appreciative to have you here, Sally, because your experience is something it's a bit out of this world for most people, and for us to be able to learn from you and be taught, because grief is such an unknown area until you experience it. And I think anyone who goes through it is like, because we don't talk about this stuff, it's like you're lost and you can't relate to anyone and you don't know who to talk to and all of these things. So I think really important conversations to have. So very appreciative of you coming in.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So we'll see how this goes. See if I can get through without crying.
Same.
Goals. No. So it would be awesome actually if we can start with Casper's birth.
Yeah.
Who's your first little boy.
Yeah.
And maybe go through his story and continue on from there.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome.
So Casper is 2 years old. So 2 years ago, his pregnancy, I just kind of like powered through. I just worked the whole time. I didn't really drop in too much. I birthed at the Byron Birth Suites. I went with the like midwifery kind of program that they have there, where it's free and they come to your house and do like a home birth. And I was very like good girl. I didn't want to be complicated, or I just wanted to go along with whatever.
Can I ask, excuse me, did you have any experience, like friends giving birth at that time, going through the program, or was it more just, I feel like this is my best option?
Yeah, pretty much. And I had one friend that had a kid and that was it. And then when I got pregnant with Casper, it was like so many of my friends were pregnant at the same time, and everyone was kind of just doing like the home birth thing. And like my business partner at the time, she was birthing at home and getting a medical midwife. And I just thought this is great. You know, I can have a midwife come to us and birth at home. And I was so confident. I was like, I'm covered in tats. Like, I'm fine with pain, but it's not about physical pain, birth. It's like, that's just an element that awakens it in my experience. So went into it like super confident, thought it's just going to be super chill, and went through like 5 different midwives before I actually got the woman that was going to birth with me. And I met her 2 weeks before my birth. So again, I was just like, oh, it's fine. Like, it doesn't matter. And yeah, my birth with him was really long. He was posterior. I didn't get any, like, there was no like emotional support from my midwife. She kind of like came in and was like, oh, your contractions are really strong, but they're not timing right. And like, just put worry and doubt into my mind from the second she arrived to our house. And that led to a transfer within her. She was there for a couple of hours and she was like, I think maybe you should come to the birth suites. Like, it's just not moving as it should, straight away. And I kind of later looked back at that, and like, after speaking to her, she had a birth the night before and hadn't slept. So her decisions on my birth were based on her emotional capacity. So I went to the birth suites. I was there. It was absolutely horrible. Hated every second of it. Knew I wasn't going to birth there. It was freezing cold. They were giving me like drips of water because I was really dehydrated. I was shivering in this bed with like fluorescent lights. Like it was the worst. And so then I got to like the 12-hour mark and they were like, we're going to have to take you to hospital because it's been too long. So then I went to hospital. Straight away I got in there and they were like, you know, we're going to give you an epidural. And by that point I was at like, it was over 24 hours and I was exhausted and like I was just like, give me the epidural. And I didn't even have a plan for the hospital. Like I just thought I would birth at home. So being in the hospital, I was just really open and just said yes. When I had the epidural, Casper's heart rate changed by like, I think it was so not dramatic. And this obstetrician came in and was like on the phone and he was like, okay, cool, you've got the all good for a cesarean. And I was like, no. And he looked at me and rolled his eyes and said, well, we all want to go home early tonight. And like, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, what? You're going to give me like major surgery just because you want to go? Like it was, you know. And then from there in the hospital, I birthed him vaginally. But the amount of intervention that they were trying to force on us was really overwhelming. There was just everything that they were trying to do to him. I kept saying no. And when you do that in a hospital, they look at you, especially if you look like me and look like my partner. It's just like, oh, these freaks, they don't know what they're doing. Like
you've got tattoos, so obviously you must be like fall into a category of human that they can just slide you in.
We've
there.
got a rebel.
It's just Did you say no to vaccines too?
Yeah, everything. I said I just like just even the no, like they wanted to put him on an antibiotic drip for 24 hours and I was like, no. And they were like, oh, well, because they took him to the nursery and gave him a glucose drip without consent. And then I like tore my way in, like blood everywhere. I was like, give me my baby. And like went to grab him and he had all these things on him. And then the midwife was like, no, you can't touch him because he's like plugged in. And I was like, no, I need to breastfeed him. She was like, oh, he's got the glucose drip so he can't be breastfed. And then they said that they needed to give him the antibiotics because he wasn't breastfeeding. I'm like, you created this. And as I got to him, he tore everything off and just like was like an absolute little monster, just like give me the boob. And I just grabbed him and put him on and like all of his levels on the screen just flattened out and went perfect. And it's like, that's your evidence. Like he just needs me. He doesn't need all of these other things. So we had a real battle. We were there for like another 12 hours just saying no to everything. And I was trying to be as polite as possible and give them the benefit of the doubt and, you know, still not be, you know, a crazy woman.
It's so hard.
Not to be.
It's so hard. And it's like, because you know there are certain things that you say in a hospital and they've already pigeonholed you. Yeah. And so when they bring out words and I feel like I've been in a situation before where I've had one of my kids in hospital and I feel like they're almost trying to get, like they want you. Yeah, they want you. So then they can like put you further in that pigeonhole and you're like sitting there where every nerve in your body is just like, give me my fucking baby. I am going to cut you all. Like I will lose my mind. And you have to shut that shit down. Like that is your natural instinct response. Every mother should feel that way. Yeah. And you have to shut that down and be like, I would like my baby, and then like try and bring up some studies that you remember,
which you never remember,
that can back you up on your decision making, which you know that the research is there, but you're like emotional. Like it's such a situation where you just like, you want to just act normal, and the normal response to someone taking your baby away from you and doing things to them that you've not consented to, your natural response should 100% be, like grab a knife and murder everyone to get your baby. But you're not allowed to do that. And you have to like pretend to be normal when like all of that is surging through your blood. It's such a just shitty situation. I just like, as you're describing it, I've just brought up a memory for me and I'm like, oh my God, like, and it just sucks. It's so bad. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. And like so many women go through it. And like, I didn't even realize how traumatic that experience was until I got pregnant again and started processing a pregnancy on a totally different frequency. And I was like, wow, everything that happened in that hospital was so full on and so traumatic. And like, you know, Casper's an absolute angel, couldn't have birthed a better child. But like, yeah, like I look back at that and I'm just like, oh, like that was bad. Like that we had to go through that.
There's actually, I just want to bring up quickly because I listened to a podcast just recently and they were talking about, they were looking at all the different births, as in a home birth with a midwife, a birth centre birth and a hospital birth. And across all of those different types of births, the outcomes for babies are the same. Like there's no difference. But the outcomes for women
It's so different.
are like exponentially worse in a hospital than in a home birth. Like as soon as you're in a hospital, it's the woman. Like the baby's not going to have a different outcome, like wherever you are. But the woman is like your percentages of being traumatized is like, yeah. So when you say like Casper's an angel, he's fine because like his outcome was going to be his outcome.
Yeah.
But it's like you as the birthing mom.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, what are you left with?
Totally.
It's so interesting. Anyway.
And like, so my second pregnancy, like as soon as I found out we were pregnant, it was just so clear to me that I was going to free birth. It was like, yeah, even my experience with my ultrasounds with Casper was actually a bit full on as well. So we just kind of made that decision really confidently. And I had known so many women that were free birthing and there's so much education and support and, you know, it was just very clear. And when I meditated with my children, that's what they wanted as well. So that decision was like really early on for us. And yeah, that pregnancy like changed me, honestly, obviously. But yeah, from the moment I found out I was pregnant, it was like, oh, yeah, I just went on such a beautiful path. And I think free birth does that. It just like gives you so much trust in yourself. And I really, really felt that. And my pregnancy with my twins was so different. Like I was meditating. I was just, everything I put in my body was just like so, so healthy and so nourishing. And yeah, it was like the most beautiful 9 months of my life. Oh God. And yeah, like the whole time I was pregnant, I 100% only thought there was one baby. And like even looking at photos of myself pregnant with Casper and my twins, like there's barely a smidge of difference in my later in my third trimester. So when people are like, how did you not know? I just, yeah, and I only ever felt one set of kicks and like I was so in tune with my body and the way that the twins were born, like it's very possible that Dusty may have been the only one kicking because of the way that TTTS works. One of the twins becomes a donor and the other twin receives.
Could you explain to us what TTS is?
So TTTS is basically a condition where, first of all, it has nothing to do with my health. It has nothing to do with sperm. It's like very, very rare where the twins attach to the placenta at the same point. So they share the blood vessels on the placenta, but each have an umbilical cord and each have an embryonic sac. So, and then because they're attached, the nutrients and everything going to them is always going to be uneven. It's never going to be 100%, equal.
Yes. But
So one twin grows faster than the other, and the bigger twin becomes a donor for the smaller twin and sends stuff via the vessels.
Yep.
And the smaller twin can have heart problems and organ problems trying to keep up. And then there's all this other kind of information about how their urine works, and one can like not have enough fluid, one can have too much. It's so like layered and complicated. And the only like, if I were to get a scan and wanted to fix it, it's surgery. It's a laser surgery on the placenta to split the vessels, and it really only gives like one twin a better chance. It's really rare for both twins to survive. They're so incredibly dependent on each other. So yeah, and you know what, like after everything I've been through, having that information, like I'm so lucky, like in this really weird way that I have an answer, because there's so many women that birth where their babies don't make it and they have nothing.
Yeah.
So like I know my twins had such a serious condition that I don't know, like if I had gotten a scan, like first of all, a scan gives me so much stress just in itself.
Yeah.
If I had gotten a scan and found out and had a super stressful pregnancy, like who knows? I might have birthed at 22 weeks, like the newspaper said. So yeah, it's really interesting having an answer and knowing that, you know, yeah, there's a lot in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was actually just going to bring up, because it reminds me of I guess we had in Brooke, who everyone can go back and listen to that story, but she birthed her baby boy, and he had a malformation of lymph nodes in one side, and she was like, if I she had a wild pregnancy and free birth, and she was reflecting back on if she had had scans, there's no way she would have been able to birth her baby in a loving environment. In hope she would have been harassed by the medical establishment too.
I think she also said that at that time, if she had had a scan, they would have said it. They had already said that it would have looked like a heart defect or something, and encouraged her to terminate, or something like that. You know,
your baby's not going to survive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And is her baby alive?
Yeah. So it's more a superficial thing than anything else.
Yeah.
But yeah, that all would have come into question quite early in the pregnancy, and like the stress that would.
Well, we always discuss, like, because we've obviously had wild pregnancies as well, like what is the benefit of knowing something and what would you do with that information?
Totally.
And is it always correct? Because we also know that it's not always correct.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of nuance to this part of the conversation, but ultimately, like, what do you do with the information?
Yeah. I would have just freaked out.
Yeah.
I would have been so stressed. And then it's like this, like knowing what I know now, I know my boys were never going to live.
Yeah.
Just from like divine messages, and so there's so much in that as well. Like I know that they were never going to be, they came here for a purpose, and they knew that I was going to free them. And once you kind of know that, like there's no turning back, there's no other answers. And like sitting with that, I know that what I did was exactly what I was meant to do.
Yeah.
And even just having that hour with my boy who came out alive, such a gift.
Yeah.
Honestly. And just what I've gained from like going through that process with them, although it's incredibly challenging and very hard, there's so much beauty in it. And we often just associate death with trauma and sadness. And it really, grief is so much more than a negative emotion or feeling. It's very, very expansive. It like remakes you as a person. And yeah, like I'm so grateful for all the changes that I've been gifted by them.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I wish they were here, obviously. But I know that they were never going to be here. So what I did was was the absolute right thing to do. Because, if I had gotten a scan and found out I had to have laser surgery and all of this intense kind of medical work, the option to terminate would have been very, very strong.
Yeah.
And I would have lost them anyway. You know what I mean?
Like
and
you're going to experience the grief at some stage.
Totally.
Like it's a situation where you can't
Yeah.
avoid grief.
And like since going through what I've been through, I've had so many women reach out to me and I've been supporting them. And women, like I've had a few women reach out in stories of them terminating and having to birth in hospital because they found out that there was, something wrong. And that pain and that decision is so heavy on them. And I really feel that for them. And the decision to end a child's life is so much different than just letting it end if that's the path that it's meant to take.
Yeah.
But I also believe that if you do terminate, then that was the choice as well. Like that's the right choice. There's no wrong choice really.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's big.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because like I also just had a thought of the picture of like, because we've actually spoken a bit on like the psyche roots of disease and where things manifest and like cancer and all these things. And I just feel like if I look at it from a big zoomed out picture, like you get pregnant, you grow a baby, and then you birth the baby, regardless of the outcome, your body gets to go through that. And there is so much happening to us on so many different levels that we will never be able to know on paper, or no one will ever be able to tell us. But to complete the picture on our own makes so much more sense from the perspective of like it's a self-healing like container almost, and it's so necessary. And I guess like you just said, it's regardless of whatever choice you make, it has to happen. But I just feel like that's such a beautiful, I don't know if beautiful is the right word, but I'm sure at some point we'll be able to call it that. But just to package it up like that almost, if you know what I'm trying to say,
100%.
like it's so important.
Yeah.
But there would be so many, like just riffing off what you said, there'd be so many parts of our body that like our mind,
You need it.
like you don't actually know. Yeah. But your body to come to the terms of grief is different. And I'm going to put myself out there and say it's different if you choose to terminate versus like letting nature take its course, because there would be processes in like the latter that you don't get to experience. And
100%.
therefore,
I agree with that.
Yeah, speaking to to those women who reached out to you who said that they like, and I would imagine there were some heavy hands behind their choice to terminate, like whether that is a choice is a whole nother discussion, but that there are processes that your body didn't go through that would
Like open channels that didn't really get to close or something.
100%.
So, and I could like, gosh, my heart just like goes out to any woman who has experienced that, because it is something that like you've made this logical decision about, but there's not like your body can't just back that up because your head's made that decision and a medical crew has made that decision and chemicals have been put in place or surgeries have been put in place. Like it's big. So when it comes, and I mean, this is something that anyone who chooses to free birth and have a wild pregnancy needs to wrap their head around, because when you're making these decisions, it's vital to know, like, okay, if I'm not getting scans, like why am I not getting them?
Yeah.
What would I do in this scenario, in that scenario? What is the best thing, like how to experience those terrible, atrocious things? And no one can actually imagine it unless you're going through it. But yeah, what for me, the question was, what would my body need? What would and to feel still connected and my soul intact, like what is going to be the best decision for me?
Yeah.
So, I don't know where I was going with that, but
You're just in
Just
your
riffing.
own words
I was.
saying what we were saying,
Exactly.
but yeah.
Another way. Oh no.
No.
Yeah, no,
it's you added, you affirmed. Yeah.
Did I? Okay, cool.
And like the whole story that I've experienced of birthing and like allowing death to happen, like the birth death connection in the birth portal is pure peace. It's not panic. It's not an emergency. Like my birth experience and what I experienced was actually so beautiful.
Can you take us through your birth experience?
So I went into labor, my waters broke. I had like the best experience of labor.
What gestation were you?
36 weeks.
36, yeah.
Yeah. And I knew because I was free birthing, I knew I was going to birth that week. I was like, I'm going to birth this week. Like there was something telling me that it was going to happen. I was so big as well. And I felt like I started feeling really out of it that week. And I was like, okay, it's coming. And I don't know if I was 36 weeks. I could have been 38 weeks, honestly. But because I only had one period after Casper. And then because I was breastfeeding him, I just thought I just had a random period, but I was actually pregnant. And then he actually weaned like almost straight away when I was pregnant. And I was like, what? What? So there was like signs, but like I had like low to mid nausea throughout the days, but I honestly just thought I had like a stomach bug. Like that was also another thing that I kept being like usually twins, like there's so many stories of like the morning sickness being so bad.
Yeah.
So everything just was really easy. Anyway, so my waters broke, 36 weeks. I just labored in bed for a couple of hours and then got in the bath and had the most like magnetic, euphoric, incredible experience. So different to Casper's labor. And my partner filled the pool. Our son was asleep. I came into the lounge room and like I was just kind of lying there and I was like, ugh. And I was like, what? And it was like 4-hour labor. So it was super quick. And like all of a sudden I was grunting and I was like, I need to push. And I was just tripping out because Casper's labor was so long. And got in the pool and was pushing in the next minute. And like when I started like actively pushing, I had like no pain whatsoever. I had like ring of fire, but it was just like really euphoric. So I birthed Dusty first and he came out like fully alive and crying straight away. When I held him, I was like, oh, he's smaller than Casper, but it wasn't like, he wasn't tiny, like I'd seen smaller newborns before. And I feel like when you birth a baby, you're like, you can't really tell.
Yeah.
So was holding him. Yeah. I got to hold him for like an hour and I was sitting in the birth pool and I was like, oh, my placenta is coming, and kind of like felt inside my yoni and felt a placenta, like very squishy, not a head. And I was like, okay, placenta. And my birth keeper arrived at that moment and she, just a birth keeper, like more of a doula kind of experience with her. And she arrived and the timing was absolutely perfect because I was about to birth another baby. And I was kind of like, because I thought I was birthing a placenta, I wasn't really tuning in too much. I was just like, I just got to get this out. And she was like, oh, maybe try like put your leg up. And I was like, okay. And as I put my leg up, she was like, it's another head. And like everything, like I was just like, oh, okay. But we, like me and my partner had discussed like if it's twins, it's twins. That's just what we were kind of going with. But everything else was telling me it wasn't twins. And then Melvin came out in like one push and did not feel like a baby at all. Like he again felt like a placenta. He was really soft, like pale white. He was almost like a moon, and much bigger than Dusty. Like I think like, well, Dusty was bigger than that, but like if he was this big, Melvin would have been like this big. That was the biggest shock. I was like, what? Like, why are they different sizes? It wasn't, oh, he's not alive. It was the size thing that was really like, and like everyone in the birth space was like a bit like, oh, what's happening?
Yeah.
And Melvin was completely stillborn. Like I genuinely don't even know if he ever fully had life. And that can happen in TTTS. They can be like very dull of the brain and like give all of the nutrients to the smaller twin. And his umbilical cord was completely filled with blood. So through like, and this is all just my own research, by the way. So if any of this is incorrect, like shoot me. But there's sometimes the donor twin, when it comes to the end of its life, will eject the last of its nutrients and bloods to the smaller twin. So in a way, like Dusty could have been too small, because if Melvin's time was up, you know, if a baby dies, they usually birth themselves. So when Melvin was born, Dusty like started to kind of, it wasn't even his breathing. Like I was holding him and he kind of started to not have as much life force. That's how I'm going to describe it. And my birth keeper was like, oh, like, and I instinctively was like sucking his nose and blowing air on him and like kind of like, come
doing
on, patting him and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden in that moment, and my birth keeper was holding Melvin, and I held him for quite a while as well. And then I was like, what's happening? Like, you take him. And then I was like, my placenta needs to come out. Like it was this like, it felt really urgent.
Yeah.
And usually that doesn't happen, but I didn't, for some reason it was like I needed to birth it. And so I squatted in the middle of the pool, and as soon like, and I was holding Dusty like this. And as soon as my placenta came out, like Dusty pretty much went. He went completely limp. Like in my head, I think he had a heart attack. And just that moment like replayed in my head, like, yeah, forever. And when I reflect on it, I just look at it and I'm like, he was so reliant on being attached to me, so reliant on being attached to Melvin. Like, in a way, it's like so beautiful. But that's like the way that he decided he would come and go. Like Melvin, in a way, sacrificed himself so he could have those moments with me. So yeah, and then
Can I ask?
Yeah.
With Melvin, when he was born,
Yeah.
what happened in the room? Like, were you feeling quite calm still, or what was that energy like?
I was like so calm the entire time. There was like at no point I couldn't flick into this emergency mode. So it just like my birth keeper was like, this baby's stillborn, we have to call the ambulance. Is that what you want to do? And I was like, yeah. And then my partner called the ambulance. The ambulance took 7 minutes to arrive. So from the moment my partner called the ambulance until the ambulance arrived, I birthed the placenta and all of that kind of happened. And like Dusty still had like electricity, and didn't officially die until we got to hospital, but like electricity, like he didn't even have a heartbeat, you know, it's just they confirmed the time of death at the hospital. And like when the paramedics entered the room, it was just like so synthetic is the only way I can describe it. It was like this other kind of energy coming in that felt so wrong for starters. And I still, like the panic for me, I realized happened when I was in hospital and they took Dusty away from me and put him in the fridge. Oh. That's when it happened. I went into like convulsive like shocks, and I realized, and I was freezing, and I realized like that was when they put him in the fridge. And I honestly believe like that, like the peacefulness of that birth space and being able to stay in that has gifted me so much. Like I feel like my boy's life force has actually returned to my womb. That's what it feels like, by not interfering and not going into this panic state and just allowing it to fully process and happen, even though there was so much going on the outer world.
Yeah.
But yeah, from when the ambulance arrived until like from then on, it was just an absolute shit show basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also in that moment, like what else were you to do? Like
totally.
I don't see any other reality playing out from that point.
And it's actually, although the media said that we were being investigated, we were never, ever, ever being investigated. In fact, the detective dropped our case almost immediately. But when the ambulance arrived, because Dusty was still had life, it really changed the outcome for us. It meant that it wasn't an investigation, whereas if he had have been gone when they got there, I think the cards would have been a bit different. Okay. And they base, there's so many little things that they base their investigation off. So in a way we were like lucky that they got there while he was still had electricity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, honey. That's so huge.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really big. And like it's been such a big transformative journey for me. But like my life right now is so different to what it was before. So much healthier, so much less toxic. I'm so much more present with my son. I'm so much more in love with life. Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like little things that I used to do or places that I used to go are now just like miracles.
Yeah.
You know, and it sucks that it takes grief to give you that, but sometimes that's what you need, you know? Like sometimes grief can really show you how amazing life is. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, like it feels like I'm like a completely new person. It's the only way to describe it.
Yeah.
It's like I'm still in this flesh, but I feel so different. Yeah.
Oh. I think like one of the biggest things, and not to take your pain or like
take it away.
But like what was so huge, because like we were pregnant at the same time, and that's how we connected through our pregnancies. And I think when I first heard about what happened to the twins, I was like, oh, like holy shit, I think I grieved for a proper week. And I don't think many people knew at that stage, but I knew the people who did. Everyone was grieving. Like it's such a loss felt by the whole community when something like that happens. And I think everyone just like so many people just wanted to gravitate towards you and just hold you in that time, because that is something that's so huge.
Yeah.
But I also know that a lot of the community freaked out.
Yeah.
And in times like this, and I mean, I've experienced it, but I know lots of people have experienced it when they're going through something that is so big. And I guess when you're going through it, you can't even describe it to people. So what now that it's still fucking raw, but now that you're this distance away from it, how would you personally hold someone who's going through something like that?
I mean, it's...
or what did you require in that time?
Yeah, I totally get the question. There's a quote by Nick Cave, and he says, like, when something really big and sad happens, like, people show up, but it's actually the people that stay that matter. And, you know, you can be there for the big things, but I think it's like constantly checking in. Like, it never goes away.
No.
So people will show up and drop food and be there. But if 2 years later it's swept under the rug, it changes your like friendship a bit. But I think like the greatest thing is just like the constant check-ins and making it as human as possible.
Yeah.
Because so much of grief is just like, it's this weird taboo where, you know, like I'll run into people for the first time and I haven't seen them since, and there'll be a moment, and then after that, most of the time it's over. And if I see them again, it's like back to normal.
Yeah.
And I know that like they're the people that are just like still my friends, but not fully on my level.
Yeah.
Whereas the people that come over still and want to get deep and want to keep talking and want to keep showing up, like that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Because you don't want it to be real. Like, I don't want this to be my story, but it is.
Yeah.
So it just makes it like, it's easier to talk about it when you talk about it more.
Yeah.
Especially when you feel safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like, and I don't know if you feel this way, but it's almost like you want people to ask you about them. It's like, I want to talk about my babies.
Depends on the person.
Yeah, okay.
Like I've had such an array of experiences. Like in the first couple of months, I barely went outside or did anything because I just needed, as well, like the whole fucking world knew. I had people in London messaging me that I don't even really know. Like it went to London. It was global.
Yeah.
Which is so stupid. But yeah, I had like an array of experiences of everything from like, and I grew up in this area, like I'm from Lennox, so I know a lot of people. I had like old school friends that would never even really talk to me. Like we'd just be like, hey, like come up and like bawl their eyes out. And that to me like almost felt a bit disrespectful. I'm like, hey, I'm out. I'm out of the house and I'm at a park with my kid. Please don't come up to me and tell me that what I went through was the worst thing that you could ever imagine in your entire life. Like, that's going to make me cry. That's going to put me in a place that I feel really vulnerable. So I've had everything from that to like people just completely blatantly ignoring me, which makes me really anxious of like, I'm like, oh, what do they think? They must hate free birth. They must think I'm a murderer too. Like, you know, and then of course there's the people that I wasn't that close to that show up so much that I'm like, we're fucking bonded now, you know? So it really shows you like who's your people and who's not your people. Yeah. But just back to your question, like just that like continual support, because every day, every week is so different. Like I was so supported through my grief. Honestly, I have an incredible family. They're all close by. I have so many mamas. Like, you know, it was insane. And I really wish every woman could have that, but they don't. It can be quite the opposite. It can be very isolating. And I guess I felt that with the media stuff because it was so not aligned that I felt scared and isolated and attacked. But the love and generosity on the other side has allowed me to be in a place of like neutrality, of like people go and hate, people go and love, like whatever, you know?
But I think that's like a big part because I mean, your situation is unique in that it did like blow up.
Yeah.
I mean, the timing of it all was when there was a particular reporter looking for these situations.
Yeah.
And yeah, so for that to then for it all to come out at the same time was
a monster.
It's like really a shit show.
Yeah.
But to know like your community like was like who know the people who know you are like just love.
Yeah.
And it's people who don't, who are projecting their own stories and all their own bullshit and are bored. I don't know. That are like that's where you're getting this.
Well, people think they know shit. They don't.
They don't.
Yeah.
They don't shit.
Yeah. Well, people have just read the media and they're like, oh my God, they could have been saved. And they don't even, like the media didn't even like say anything about their condition or anything. No. So it's just like so blasé to, first of all, like have such a strong opinion against a mum who's just lost 2 kids. Like it blew my mind that people were turning to hate from my story. I was like, what? That's where you go? And then like some of the stuff that was being said, I was just like, you've got to own that now. Like if you said that about me on a platform that's public, it's there forever. Like if you lose a kid, you better fucking hope that no one thinks that about you because it's the worst energy. But I've just like, my walls are pretty thick with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think as well because of my exterior and all of that, it made the story so much like easier to kind of blow up. And there was a lot of like discrimination against us with the coroners in conjunction with the media that like it was hell, absolute hell. But yeah, it's just so interesting to see that side of humanity and that it exists is just so sad and so like such a low level energy. Yeah. And no mother should have to go through that. Like what we went through was pretty full on. Yeah.
Yeah. So when it was all in the media, was that then tied in with any other like anything else happening as well as?
Yeah, 100%.
So so it just like snowballs from that.
So
point.
basically like the coronial decision on our boys was majorly affected by the media. It was almost like they were like, yes, okay, we know they free birth, we know this, it's in the media, like and it's the coronial system in Australia is like, I thought birth in the system was bad. Like death in the system is so backwards. You have no rights to your babies at all. Like if you say no to something, they can do it. And the things that they're doing are like beyond like, I don't want to go into it too much, but as a parent, you have no right to your baby's body at all. They can do whatever they want. And they kept our boys for 47 days. Like it was extreme. And our death care worker was like, you've got a case of discrimination here. Like she said that. She was like, I've never seen this before. Like this, it's really,
So what was the reason, like what were they saying to you? Because obviously you were asking for your babies back.
Yeah. So the reason was health and safety for society. That was the reason for the coronial decision of taking them, keeping them for that long, doing what they did to them, was health and safety of society. And we were like, what does that even mean? And the woman was like, we just spoke to the admin lady and she was like, oh, just to give feedback to the paramedics. Like, it's just, they just come up with any reason. Yeah.
I don't even have words for that.
Yeah. It's so, and like, part of all of this happening to me makes me feel like I need to change this, because when you go through something so severe and you have your rights stripped away and you're left like questioning so much, you realize that like, not like, who's going to change it? You know what I mean? And it's like, it needs to change because it's so inhumane. It's what makes death so unsacred. The fact that we're giving up our children's bodies and it's going to Newcastle and we have no decision whatsoever in the process. And if we do want to have a decision, we have to go to the High Court. And even if you win, they can still do whatever they want.
I have so many. But the thing is okay, so if a hypothetical situation, you chose not to have scans in your pregnancy and you were birthing at a birth center or in a hospital, and you went in at 36 weeks, which is still within those bounds. If you were 36 to 38 weeks, if that had have happened in the hospital, would you have had your babies back? It's still the same outcome. The babies, what has happened to your babies is the exact same thing. What would that situation look like? Or are they still doing the same thing?
So I believe if you birth in hospital, they can give you a cause of death way easier. So sometimes I don't even need to go to the coroners. They actually told us after we were at the hospital that they didn't need to see the boys because twins, complicated, all of that.
Yeah.
And then when the first newspaper article got leaked, they changed their minds and said, we need to autopsy one of them. We need to autopsy Dusty. And then more came out and they changed their mind again and said, we're going to do both. And then more came out and we thought we were going to get them back after the autopsy. And they said, we need to autopsy their brains, which is so crazy.
Yeah.
And we were saying no the whole time. And this is 3 weeks into what I've just been through. So on the phone to the coroners every day, begging them not to do it. And they still do it. They still did it. They did all of it. And then they kept him for another 2 weeks. And, it's just like the moment when they came back and we had them and buried the placenta, I can't even tell you the grounding that happened with that. And it's like the suffering that was drawn out because of that is just it's not fair at all.
No.
Yeah. But so much of me is this is how we change it.
Yeah.
By speaking about it and educating women and going, hey, if this happens, you need to know that this is a possibility. And it fucking sucks that we need to do it in this way. That's why I really do want to make this information and this process sacred and beautiful. And the system does the complete opposite. So education is power, really. And I really hope one day that it becomes more humane because it's really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and on so many levels, it's ground level and then going into systems and then these other systems that are controlling.
Well, I
all
just
of that outcome.
was thinking birth is obviously incredibly transformative in its own self, and for death to be so transformative, because you've just told us how much that has changed you
Yeah.
and how much is available when you go through that experience. And that's not something that you just get from reading a book or like, you know, going to a lecture at university. That is like a really spiritual, sacred, rare experience. And of course that has to be taken away.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
of course that's not accessible
Yeah.
because that's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that be able to be returned to us, like it's our business. These are our babies and every part of them belongs to us and shouldn't have to be handed over at any point.
Yeah.
Because obviously, it shouldn't at any point.
Yeah.
And to call it like health and for society or some.
It's like, what does it have to do with society? Like,
it's your experience.
I don't want it to be in society.
Yeah. Well, it's taking something that, because I mean, we were speaking earlier, like death is unavoidable. We're all going to die. We're all going to experience loved ones dying. And like there was a time where it was like you weren't going to know if your baby was going to be there at the end of birth. And that was all tragic. And it was classed as something that's really tragic. And it is an experience that, I mean, you don't want to do, but we don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
Like we're all going to experience tragedy. Now we're turning it into trauma by medicalizing it, by injecting like hate where it's not needed, by injecting like projections and like other people's traumas. Like which I mean essentially is probably what that hate comes from. It's just other people's trauma, and so they're holding on to this. They see an outlet, and it's
fear.
It's fear,
like,
and
the system is so scared of like death and
birth
and you know, like instances like this can really exactly like give you like a spiritual awakening, and that's not what they want. So to take the bodies away is them having control, and it's really wild, the death system.
It's horrific because it's what makes it so debilitating for years and years and years. And I obviously have not experienced this, so I may not have any idea what I'm saying. But like I've read books and, you know, seen art and things that represent women who have lived in the middle of nowhere and have just birthed their babies alone on their kitchen hardwood floors, and their baby hasn't made it, and they bury it in the backyard and they put a cross there. Yeah. And
that's what
they go back out and they till the garden. And of course it's hard. And of course no woman, it's hardening and whatever it is. But I think what makes it, obviously by hearing your experience, what makes it so debilitating is the intervention after the fact. Yeah. And, you know, putting someone through the separation of your baby, the scrutiny, the accusations, prolonging what is necessary for you to put parts of it to rest, and allowing yourself to do the expansion and feel the experience and have the spiritual, you know, what do you want to call it? I don't know, because I'm yet to experience anything like it, but it just feels like, as same with birth, like the more we just unnaturalize, is that a word?
Yeah. It is now.
Unnaturalize such a natural experience, it just makes so much fucking room for heartache and unnecessary debilitating trauma and pain.
Yeah.
Just leave us the fuck alone.
Totally.
You know, and by the way, I'm just going to say, like, I understand to a smallest degree why these things are in place, because there are fucking psychopaths out there who do harm intentionally and a lot of things. But for the majority of us, this is not a thing. Yeah. Like, we don't need this. Yeah. We don't need these systems overarching on top of us, doing this shit to us.
It's overreach, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's absolutely overreach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's big.
Yeah.
It's big.
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure.
Mm.
Yeah. And the expansion that I'm feeling on the other side of it now is like infinite. Like if I feel like if I hadn't have gone through the process of what I went through and anything had have changed, like my outcome, like you said, like it's the woman's outcome. Like if I had have gone into the system at all, like I would just, the trauma would be more. But because I got to free birth my children.
Yeah.
I actually free birth twins without any like physical complications. I know that sounds crazy, but like no umbilical cords wrapped, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And after talking with my birth keeper, she was like, I'm still blown away that you birthed twins without any complications. I know that sounds so crazy, but you know, like they had their condition.
And it was 4 hours. Like that is so quick too.
Yeah.
I mean, 4 hours, like you didn't even really know you were in labor. Like if your plan was to go somewhere to birth them, would you have even made it? Like
Totally.
it's like there's so many there's so many layers to this that it's just like, and oh God, I can't envision anything in that particular situation that I would have, like, if like when you go and put yourself into that situation, like I can't imagine having made any decisions differently to what so it's like well when you strip it all back to that, it just comes back to the fact that this happens, and we need to have like conversations around it and like really like, and some acceptance, because I think that's one of the,
well, even just like on a more like vanilla mainstream perspective, like millions of babies are born asleep, and that means millions of women experience this regardless of whether you want a free birth or not. And like I've heard women say that in the moments they didn't even know if they were allowed to have a vaginal birth, or like they didn't know if they were just going to be put to sleep and their baby would be taken out and they'd ever see it again. They didn't know whether they would have milk come. They didn't know what would happen to them. They didn't know literally anything. They didn't know if their baby they would ever even see them, or they'd just be like, if
they're allowed to hold their baby.
They're allowed to hold them, how long they can spend with them, what the process is, like, because it's so foreign. It's like, you know, it's just not something that anybody, regardless of your opinion, value, lifestyle choices, pregnancy, anything. Yeah, it's like, you know, and I've listened to multiple podcasts leading up to this of more vanilla stories, and I shouldn't say vanilla because I just mean like a very different set of values.
Went conventionally down
yes.
at like the hospital.
And, you know, a lot of women just said that they were totally like monitored, had obstetric care.
Yeah.
And somewhere in the last couple of days, their baby just slipped away.
Yeah.
And so, it's like those women still need to understand this as well. And it's not just for free birthing women. It's like,
and those are women that don't have answers.
I know.
They're just like, you're left with like, well, what happened?
Well, this is the thing, and I feel like this is the gap of trauma that will just be bigger and bigger for these types of women, because they don't actually get to sit in it. They don't actually get to experience the full cascade of, you know, what we're talking about, that zoomed out, whatever happens, that magic that happens to us, and our bodies are capable of obviously processing and doing it as we need it to do. And that would not happen like that. Like there's no fucking chance that that's happening.
Totally.
Like that.
Because you're giving up your power.
You
know,
well,
if you're going into the system and you're doing it that way, like you're outsourcing your power to someone else. Like they've
like, okay, we're taking your baby now. Okay.
Yeah.
Like horrible, horrific.
I mean, it's so interesting. I came to this like weird question the other day of like, if you were pregnant and you knew that you were going to, like, if some God told you that that your baby was going to pass, but you were going to be able to birth your child and you had to, how would you birth? And you knew your baby was going to pass.
Mm.
You know, we always like think that the outcome is going to be life, but when we really think about the outcome as death
Yeah.
and base our like birth decisions on that, like so many more women would free birth, you know?
100%.
I was
Yeah.
actually like, I watched a video not that long ago of a woman who at 20 weeks ish, I'm going to riff here because I can't remember exact numbers, but she had the morphology scan and found that the baby was not going to survive.
Yeah.
And they encouraged a medical termination or termination for medical reasons, I think it's called. And she couldn't do that. So she took the pregnancy. They said that the baby wasn't going to survive the pregnancy, but if the baby did, wasn't going to survive birth, etc. And she was like, okay. And she still planned her home birth, and she had midwives there, and she had photographers there and everything. And I guess everyone was just G'd up for what was going to happen. And she did birth her baby, and her baby was breathing and opened her eyes, and she got to feed her baby, and it was 9 hours later.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
Like, isn't that like that's so much more than, you know?
And I think like that situation, her body got to process and like got to have those moments that would have been absolutely stripped away at 20 weeks.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we were talking about that situation. And it's like, well, I mean, do you want that information at 20 weeks and start grieving then? Or do you live in the moment of this, like nothing else was different about her pregnancy, and it was all beautiful, and like she could have gone a whole pregnancy and then experienced the grief.
Yeah, like what is the benefit of medical intervention?
Yeah, like the grief is there. Like you're still experiencing loss. Like the loss is there. So, but she got to have those moments and capture those images and that kind, you know. So it's, when you look at all of these stories, it's like, well, like, the resounding picture is really just us and understanding grief and giving grief space and giving loss space and coming to terms with the fact that it is another process that we fuck up essentially in modern society, and we need to bring that back and take ownership of it. Yeah. And thank you so much for coming and sharing your story, because like all of the aftermath part, like, because like the grief and like the loss and your birth is one part of it, but then the trauma that you experienced after is something that does 100% need to change. Yeah. Like the system can't be taking babies off mothers who, for all extents and purposes, like there is a lot of evidence of how brilliantly you were supporting your body, how much you were looking forward to welcoming these children into the world. Like you're not in that psychopath. Yeah. Like fuck ton of evidence. You're not in that like percentage of psychopaths, you know? So like, yeah, when you've got that there, tattoos or not, like to take a woman's children away from her, like that is the part that needs to change. That is the part that everyone should be angry at, and that is the part that we should be writing stories about in the media. Like this is what we need to be highlighting, because that is not okay. Yeah. And for media to then change the direction of, and like how awesome is media? I mean, the last few years, God, they're on point, aren't they? Like, but for that to change big decisions in your life, like this, like external, like completely external force that has nothing and has no information about what you are, what you're going through, that situation that is extremely like, it's big for you, but it's small in the scheme of things. Like I think the statistics are roughly 90 babies every year in hospitals are born still in Australia. Yeah. So this is not something that is never experienced and oh my goodness, like for that media to be changing,
so fixated on me, yeah.
But to change then the decisions of coroners and of hospitals and like that needs to change. That's what we should be reporting on.
It really only supports one side of the system.
so
like
biased.
coroners don't say, okay, well, yes, I'm sorry that your baby was born asleep, but what happened 2 days before your baby was asleep at your obstetric appointment? Or it's like they don't want to do that.
No.
Yeah.
They wouldn't say, well, did you have like an external exam?
Yeah.
Or did you, list all the things that happened during every single appointment, because we've got to find out why.
I mean, all they had to do with us is just Google why they were different sizes, and the answer's there.
Yeah.
All the answers are actually already there. What they did to them was just actually just cruelty.
Yeah.
To punish us. And it's just I think a lot of people think that free birth is so irresponsible and radical, but most women free birth because of trauma experiences in the medical system. And that's not to I revere mothers that make the choice just for themselves, but unfortunately free birth is a lot.
Well, I mean, and we just spoke to Melanie, the midwife, recently, and she was because she asked the question and did a PhD on why women choose to birth outside the system, and it was mainly either women
they just want to. Honestly, that was it.
No, it was
they just felt safe there.
I think some were saying that, but it was more all the other options were not applicable. They were never going to set foot in a hospital when asked why, because of some traumatic experience that they'd had in a hospital. And it was no, they didn't have access to a midwife, or the midwife they did have access to was not on par with them, or they're the support that women would usually want in that situation is just non-existent. I want you to be there, but don't touch me, don't monitor me, don't do that. That you can't, that's not a thing. Yeah. So this is a thing. So it's a bit of a cycle.
It's huge.
Yeah.
I mean,
they're creating this and then demonizing it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's what they do, honestly. And I genuinely believe this is how we change it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could go into the system and try and change it. It's so rigid. There's so much red tape in place to try and make any tiny little changes. We see it with basically things like Byron Council. People want to make change, but they can't. And it's
I've had it so many times. Even in the thick of COVID, being in a hospital, NICU with one of my babies, I was yeah, we would love to do that, but we just can't. I'm says who? You all want to do this, but you can't because who?
Yeah, totally.
Who is that person? And why can't
fully? You? Yeah, it
really happens so often. But lots of unfortunately, mothers have a lot of work.
A lot. I know, and it's not until you become a mother that you realize how bloody
important it is.
Yeah,
we're just up against so much as well. Even just with pesticides and food and you know what I mean? It's how did we get this far? It's really crazy. And then to step back is seen as so negative. And it's well, actually, this is what's going to save the world is women birthing in their power and creating perfect humans outside of the system.
Yeah. Oh, well, Sally, thank you so much for coming on and taking us through everything you've learnt in this space, because it's huge and it happens and we need to know how to navigate it.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate you. And I'm sure there's lots of people listening who also really appreciate you coming on and
you're doing
it.
a little bit of work on this, offerings for people who may be experiencing something like this, aren't you?
Yeah, it's baby steps, but I've just put together a free online Zoom circle, and just to kind of speak more about this and just really trying to put more sacredness on death and shine light on it. It's just seen in such a negative way, and I'm feeling unfortunately really called to just kind of like become a leader. And it's not anything that I ever imagined doing ever. And it's really scary and it's like pushing me to my edge. But like I need to. It's like this like, So I feel the
fire
path
in you.
Yeah.
So anyone experiencing loss within birth and pregnancy, this is what the offering's for?
I mean, my bigger picture is to turn it into like a charity, to support women with like high grade herbs and all of that when they go through loss, because what you get from the hospital is like garbage. Like this, like they give you like little baby outfits to put on your children when they come back, and like it's actually really insensitive. Like we didn't even get to see our children when they got back because they were so, altered by the coroners. So my bigger vision would be to offer free support and free herbs and all that kind of stuff to women that have been through it. And then the bigger vision is changing the system. But for now, it's just like circles for women. Yeah. But you got to dream big.
You do.
So if people want to get in contact with you, where can they find you?
So my new kind of page is called Spirit Mama, MUMA, the Aussie way. And my first circle is, I don't know when this is going to go, but it's on the 26th.
We'll link everything anyway.
26th of this month, and it's all online. You can just DM me your email and I'll just kind of go from there. I'm going to do like a big recap of it and kind of send it out so everyone has like, the teachings and all that. But it's more than just like loss, it's birth and, how to really put sacredness in the whole portal from birth to death. Yeah.
Oh, that's big. Holding your
I'm so
own
nervous.
story and then holding other people's is gonna, like, that's big.
Yeah. But it's, I don't know. I feel so called.
Yeah.
Like it's impossible for me to say no to this calling because of the amount of women that have come to me with similar stories and experiences wanting support. I'm like, whoa, okay, is this, and I'm doing it for my children, that's like, it feels really full circle for them.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, well done.
Yeah, you did so well.
Proud of you, Mama.
Oh, shit.
All right, peace out, everyone. We're going to cry. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to the Road to Wisdom podcast. To join the journey, you can follow us on Instagram at theroadtowisdom.podcast and at www.theroadtowisdompodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. We look forward to seeing you next week with more juicy content.